Hello and welcome to the Working Tools Masonic Podcast and part 2 of our discussion of the Conference of Grand Masters.
Ladies and gentlemen, brethren all, welcome to the Working Tools Podcast, a casual conversation around Freemasonry. First, it's important to note that our opinions and thoughts are our own and do not reflect those of our Grand Lodge or respective craft or concordant bodies. Please connect with us and ask questions, either here on YouTube or on our Facebook page. We'd also appreciate a thumbs up and especially any comments on our videos.
Working Tools Podcast. I'm Matt Appel, and I'm a Mason here in the state of Washington with David Colbeth, also from the Grand Lodge of Washington, and Worshipful Brother Stephen Chung from the Grand Lodge of British Columbia in the Yukon are our usual hosts. And we have a special guest today, Most Worshipful Brother Jim Mendoza, who is the past Grand Master of Masons in Washington. Thanks for coming out tonight, Jim.
Oh, my pleasure.
So we left off our discussion earlier about the Conference of Grand Masters, and I think, David, you had a question you had queued up there?
Yeah. I just was noticing that in the future locations, we were talking about that. Of course, Washington's going to be the next location in 2021, and back in Wisconsin, in Milwaukee in 2022, and then to Arlington in 2023. And I know in that same general area is where the Conference Grand Masters started. And so I was curious if Jim had some insight. How did it start? Why did it start? I know Matt has it's got some documentation on it too, maybe some other facts and figures, but how did it kind of originate?
Well, again, the general idea, as I talked about earlier, was that for Grand Masters from the various jurisdictions to get together and to talk about the issues and the opportunities that existed in their respective Grand Lodges, and that hopefully they may be able to leverage those ideas to help improve the Masonic experience in their respective Grand Lodge. They thought this was a good idea to do this on a pretty regular basis, and they decided that around President's Day was a good time to do it. Now, keep in mind, when they made this decision, there was no such thing as President's Day, so it was around George Washington's birthday more than anything that they wanted to do it. The idea is they would meet regularly, and then the idea expanded to say, okay, every 3 years we'll meet here, and we'll here in Washington, D.C., and then rotate it out. Kind of stayed central in DC, and then it started rotating out to other places. If memory serves correctly, 1969, I think, was the last time it was held in the state of Washington. The idea is, again, it would go east, west, east, west, east, west. Over the years, it's become more central. I think I may have told you earlier that, prior to me going to Louisville this past last year, we were in we were in Indianapolis, and before we were in Rapid City, South Dakota. Excuse me. Before that was Indianapolis. Before that was Omaha. So kind of very central, that sort of thing. People ask, well, it's February. Why don't you hold it at a hot place? Yeah, why don't you hold it at a hot place? Well, we did that. Once we tried to do it in Honolulu, Hawaii, and that was great. But the only problem was, as soon as the word got out that a convention was coming to Honolulu, the consolidating groups got in, and they basically took away any deals we might have been able to have. And so that was kind of a bummer. So it's difficult to get some of those resort type places for our convention. And I'm not saying we settle for places, but there are some of the higher end places that people think you'd want to go to that just doesn't work. And then there are some Grand Lodges who look at the potential of hosting it, and they say, boy, that's rather daunting. And I get that, because trust me, since 2017, since we've known we were going to have it in 2021 here in Seattle, yeah, there have been times when I've asked myself, boy, what did I get our Grand Lodge into? But there are other times when I said, this is going to be great for Washington. So I'm pretty happy about that. But yeah, so it's worked its way through. Now, part of the bidding process has been interesting. Again, trying to find a city that's doing that, and sometimes you get intimidated by the food and beverage numbers. For those of us those of you who've looked at conferences and events, they always tell you that food and beverage is the sticking point. I believe the food and beverage, like Washington D.C. wanted to host it again, but they wanted to host it 2 years in a row. I was more than happy. Of course, I believe the food and beverage guarantee for the weekend was $110,000. That's a lot of meals.
Wow.
Yeah. So you could, so you have to think about, how many delic's going to show? What's the potential price per plate they're going to have to pay for that? Is that something that people will bear? And one of the many things I've learned doing these, having helped plan Grand Lodge, things like that, is that, there's a tipping point that the brethren will pay for something. And so that's kind of a critical thing. But I've always believed that if you have a quality enough event, that helps to mitigate the cost of the event. But there's other things that we can do to help to help out with that, help in hitting our food and beverage number. So
well, if you get Tom Douglas and Terry Rotaro to cater, we can impress them with the local cuisine.
Yeah, that's an interesting thing too, because a lot of times, when you're dealing with catering, you're dealing with the hotel, and it's the hotel chef, and a lot of your higher end type chefs very rarely attach themselves to a hotel. They attach themselves to their own restaurant, which is going to be interesting, because right outside the Westin there are three Tom Douglas restaurants. If you want to walk a little bit further, there's a fourth one. Terry Rotaro has one in downtown, plus one on Capitol Hill, and not far away,
right?
Near the Sheraton, yes. And then not far away is one of the top 10 independent steakhouses in the United States, the Metropolitan Grill. Plus, let's not forget, we're Seattle. We got seafood, and we got some of the best seafood in the world. So it's going to be a thing. But getting back to the concept, so we rotate it. We try to rotate it around. Louisville has been Louisville, I believe, since Baltimore, and maybe even BC when we held it in Vancouver, is a premium city. And Seattle, we also believe, is a premium city. So we're looking forward to showing off. Crystal City in Virginia is going to be a premium city. And I think it's going to be a great opportunity for us when we go back to Virginia to be able to go back to DC for tours and check out, check out the Washington Memorial, to check out the Capitol Mall and see some of the exhibits there. To go to Arlington is something that I'm looking forward to. Whenever I'm in the DC area, I always make it a point to go to Arlington. These things, they're great historical things too, because we were reminded that a lot of the stuff that we see when those places and like that, there are Masons who basically put their mark on those places as a result on our society. And it's a legacy that, if we're paying attention, is very weighty and reminds us of the roles that we need to play as the Masons of today in today's society.
So you guys actually have outings for your at your event where everybody goes out to see something? Because at Grand Lodge here, we only have the spouse, the ladies programs. They get to go out and do things. We always just have to sit in more stuffy meetings.
Yeah, that is true. That is true. And so, but yeah, for the conference grandmasters, you bring people in, and it's important. It's in part of the deal and part of the attraction of any place is, what are you going to show us, right? Yes, it is. Yes, the conference of grandmasters is at its core a business meeting. We're trying to figure out ways to improve the Masonic experience, both at the Mason level, but also at the Grand Lodge level. But along the way, all work and no play, as they say.
Well, no, I like the idea, because I wish they would adopt that idea in the Grand Lodge, because we go to all these different places for our Grand Lodge events as well, and it'd be nice to actually be able to go and see it, not at midnight after everything's done.
There is something to that. When we were in Louisville, the two organized tours that were part of the conference itself were to Louisville, Slugger, and Churchill Downs. which was kind of cool. There was a pre-tour to Maker's Mark, which is for those who aren't aware, is a bourbon distillery in Louisville, actually outside of Louisville, excuse me. And it's just a way for to get relaxed, to get to the tours are a way to kind of break up what could be monotony, because it's there comes a point in time if you're just talking business, all of a sudden, boom, people get bored. And it's important to provide that level of okay, let's step away from it a little bit, because the tour will allow us to refresh our heads. But you have to understand the tours that are done are typically before that conference actually starts. Because once the conference starts, we're in it, and we're working. There's dinner, obviously, and there's entertainment at dinner. But once the conference starts, we're pretty much in it. We're not disappearing anywhere. We take care of the fun part before we get started. Now, the cool part about Seattle is I've encouraged people to show up early and stay late, right? Because we got a lot to do in the Great Pacific Northwest. But again, still at its core, the conference is an opportunity for grandmasters and their suite of officers to get together to learn ideas that can improve the Masonic experience. Again, at the individual Mason level, as well as at the Grand Lodge level. And there's also classes for grandmasters, deputy grandmasters, senior grand wardens, and junior grand wardens to help them better understand their role in the process. Because it's one thing to be elected to office, it's nothing to know, okay, what do I do? Especially for the newest guy. Because a lot of times, the junior grand warden is like, oh my gosh, I'm overwhelmed. So, we're here to take care of that.
Stephen, if you're jealous of destinations, our next Grand Lodge is communication is going to be at the Great Wolf Lodge here, which is a hotel with a connected water park, indoor water park. So if you want to come down in June and wear your Speedo and your apron at the same time, you're welcome to come on down.
Yeah, I think they'd kick me out for my Speedo, right? But I've heard about that Great Wolf Lodge. Now, when in June is that?
It's the second weekend in June.
Hey, isn't that our Grand Lodge? Or no, ours must be the one after that.
Yeah, you guys are. Yeah,
I think yours is the
BCU.
weekend.
Yeah, BCU kind of typically the weekend after. I think every 7 years they intersect, is how that works because of just calendar anomalies.
Mm.
But no, the Conference of Grandmasters, it's always in February. And I know there was talk about moving it, but you got to be careful about that, because when you move an event, there's other events that already have times, right? And all of a sudden now you say, it's one thing to say, let's move it because we can have a warmer month. But what if the other month you're into, is already been taken by, number one, maybe another outside organization, or number two, you have a Grand Lodge that does their Grand Lodge at that point in time. It's not that easy to ask a Grand Lodge to change their annual communication. I'd venture guess that 99% of them would say thank you, but no thank you. So
the Grand Lodge in BC has a calendar program, a Google Calendar program, but they weren't using it themselves. Right? They were planning events when other areas already had events planned, and so now there's conflicts. And if they just used the program, right, that's in place, they would have not been booking these double conflicts, right?
Yeah.
So
now I want to go back to a comment that David made about the fact that in 23, it's the conference will be held in Crystal City, Virginia. If my math is right, that's the 100th anniversary of the George Washington Masonic Memorial, is built there in Alexandria, Virginia, and that's going to be quite the draw. To know that you're going to be able to have the Conference of Grand Masters and the 100th anniversary of the George Washington Masonic Memorial happening at the same time. I think that's going to be really cool. And I think that's going to be quite the event to attend, because again, Masonic education is important, even for Grand Masters, as they say, and to learn more about arguably our most important Mason and without a doubt, the most important man in the history of the United States of America. That's a big deal, and for Masons from all over the world, not just North America, but from South America, the Caribbean, from parts of Europe, to be there to celebrate that. I think it's a big deal, and I hope that brethren will come to that, so that way they can see that, and they can actually see how the conference works. That it's not a bunch of grandmasters going off on some sort of boondoggle or vacation, because there is no boondoggle or vacation happening here. There's work happening, and work, again, for the benefit of the individual Mason all the way up to the Grand Lodge. So it's my hope that for that particular one, especially that the brethren will want to come out for that one. In all likelihood, that'll probably be my last conference of grandmasters, because, as I keep telling David, I need to become a has-been. And to date I've been failing. I appreciate that, because I get the feeling, Matt, that I'm failing miserably at being a has-been.
I think it's great that the past grandmasters participate in that and continue to participate in that, because unlike at lodge, past masters, half of them seem to disappear and fade away into the background, and we that are still around don't get the benefit of their knowledge and experience and wisdom. They gain a lot on their journeys through the chairs, and it's nice that when you hear about them sticking around to share that.
Yeah, the thing though, as a past grand, you have to be judicious when you do that, because one of the things that happens when you put a most worshipful stir in any group, any circle of people, is that all of a sudden there's this, whether it's earned or not, deference to that individual. And in many cases, when I'm in a room with people, I want to know what other people have to say. I want to know what their thoughts are, because people got to spend a whole lot of years listening to me. I'd love to. My favorite thing about being in a group of Masons is sitting down. Maybe I get the topic started, or maybe I come into a topic and I just sit back and listen, because there's some great perspectives that are shared out there. Some things that I may not have thought about, or maybe things that I have thought about, and maybe back in my day they didn't work, but maybe they're working now because of certain dynamics that exist. So yeah, it's important. Yes, it is important to have a past person there for perspective, but that past person, if, in my viewpoint, if they're doing it right, are listening very carefully. Maybe they interject from time to time, but they're listening very carefully, because it's important to get that. It's important to get that insight from them.
So you said earlier
from other brethren.
Oops, sorry. You said earlier there's about 1,000 Masons attend this event.
Well, about when I say 1,000 people, because you remember the ladies come too.
Oh, is that including ladies? Okay, so
yeah.
So I guess my question is, of the Masons who attend, if maybe there's, I don't know, 500, I'm just to pull a number out of the air, is there about 100 of them maybe are current grandmasters? Are the others are working their way up the line, or are past grands like yourself?
The short answer to that question is yes. I won't say every, but the vast majority of delegations are represented by the grandmaster. So let me give you the visual. You walk into the room, and you know how typical table watch has got that U shape. They have that U shape. So think of this one big U shape, okay? And in alphabetical order, the grandmasters sit around this U. All right. So Washington would be if you're coming on the left-hand side, close to the front. All right, because it goes in alphabetical order. At the very front are the executives. In other words, the chairman of the planning committee, the vice chairman of the planning committee, the host grandmaster, typically speaking, the grand chaplain of that grand lodge, the executive secretary. So that's who sits at the front table. That's who's at the front dais. Behind the U are the the deputy grand master, senior grand warden, junior grand warden. Some grand lodges, as you know, have more than that. So you may see something like a grand chancellor in some lodges. In some grand lodges, you may see some working their way all down to the grand junior steward, because there are some places where the junior grand steward or grand junior steward are part of the progressive line. And then there are places like New York where the Grand Master and Deputy Grand Master are the progressive line, all right? Because they serve 2-year terms, and so behind the U of Grand Masters is everyone else, and that can include past Grand Masters as well. So that's who's in that room. I like to jokingly say, you know, let's take 100 type A personalities, lock them in a room, and let's see what happens when all is said and done. But good discussion happens there. You would think that many type A personalities in the same room, things could get kind of heated. No, civility prevails, and it's an amazing thing to watch, because everybody wants to have a successful conference. Additionally, there are representatives from concordant bodies there. For example, the Sojourners, the National Sojourners are there. And they have what's called the Grand Masters chapter, where if you're either a Grand Master, past Grand Master, or working right up the line, you can become a member of the Grand Masters chapter of the National Sojourners. The other committees that are there's other committees. The National Sojourners. These basically are military Masons, who basically, you know, they have a home lodge, but because military people, especially in the United States, you know, can be stationed pretty much anywhere, you know, sometimes they're looking for a Masonic landing spot. And National Sojourners is basically this group that can help them find that landing spot, if you will. But beyond that, they are primarily a military, they are primarily a Masonic order that has military members only. The exception to that rule is the Grand Masters chapter, which can have members like myself who are Grand Masters, but did not serve, but are positively predisposed to the military. So that exists there. Additionally, the other bodies like the George Washington, the board of directors for the George Washington National Masonic Memorial, they're present. The Masonic Service Association they're present as well, because they're there to talk about their programs. And of course, the subsequent host Grand Lodges will be there as well. Then they'll have their delegations. Some places will bring their office staff with them, again, to help better understand the administration of individual Grand Lodges, because some are a little different than the others.
Jim, can you talk a little bit about talking about having great discussions? I know that we've had the Western Conference of Grand Masters, which happens on the Thursday preceding the Conference of Grand Masters. Does that include BC UConn? I don't know if Western Conference does. And then you said there was a new one that's being formed as well.
Well, it's not so much. Let's see. Let's back up. The Western Conference, yes, does include British Columbia, UConn. They were voted. They were elected in 2016, if memory serves. You have to, in order to stay a member of good standing of the Western Conference, you can't miss more than 2 years in a row. So you have to have a delegate.
The Western Conference is basically Western Canada and Western United States. So does it go? How far east does it go roughly?
Let's see. The Western Conference of Grand Masters includes Alaska, BC, Washington, Oregon. Trying to remember them all. California,
Hawaii,
Arizona, and Hawaii. That's the Western Conference. Then there's the Mountain Conference, which that's Idaho, Nevada, that group. And then there's the Midwest Conference, which basically recently changed their bylaws, because they used to meet in August, and now they're going to meet the Thursday or Friday before the Western Conference. I mean, before the Conference of Grand Masters, and so they're coming to Seattle as well. So they're not a new group, but they're an existing group that just typically changes bylaws to where they're going to go. And then, of course, there's a Southeast Conference, which is that Florida Panhandle area. There's and I believe that goes up as far as Kentucky, and then above that is the Northeast Conference. So they have these. So basically, what it is, you have these groups of grandmasters that have basically similar needs based upon geography that meet, and then you have the big conference that brings everyone together. And a lot of times, some of the bleed over there's some bleed over from the topics that have come out of those individual conferences into the main conference for discussion. At the Western Conference this year, we had presentations from, I think, all but one of the Grand Lodges that were in attendance, talking about a variety of things. Ed Wood, who, as you know, David and Matt, is our Junior Grand Warden. By the way, that's kind of a hazing thing that we do. The Junior Grand Warden gives the presentation for our Grand Lodge at the Western Conference. So, we send the rookie out. But he gave a presentation on guarding the West Gate. And interesting thing, excuse me, still have a little asthma issues from Louisville. Any event,
from China, eh?
Yeah, that's I came to Louisville. So, any event, the main conference had a discussion on guarding the West Gate, but their focus was strictly on background checks, whereas Ed's focus was, background checks are important, but there's other things you can do. Like, for example, you have to stop, giving a person a petition the instant they express an interest. You have to find out why they're interested. Are they just there for idle curiosity, or are they really into it? And then, so he talked more about the 6 steps and how that works. And a lot of people were very intrigued by, again, this holistic way of pre-screening a candidate. California did this. They also did a presentation on data analysis, which is a little different than the presentation that Ohio did in the main conference. Ohio's focused on one-day conferrals versus individual degree conferrals, and they were showing that there was no statistical difference in retention. I could go a little bit deeper into that, but they were showing that, whereas California was going into really went into the weeds with some of their information. They were finding out things like for example, they have a lot of affinity lodges in California. An affinity lodge, basically, Luz Vermendes in Washington is a perfect example of an affinity lodge, a lodge where everyone kind of shares something specifically in common. So, like Luz Vermendes, that's it's a Filipino-American lodge is what that is there. But for the longest time, we used to have lodges in Washington. Maritime Lodge, as an example, which doesn't exist anymore, was a lodge that if you worked on the docks, you were a member of that lodge. Westgate Lodge used to be in downtown Seattle. They were a jeweler's lodge. Of course, you wouldn't know that legacy anymore. Rainier 189 used to be a cop lodge, cop and firefighter lodge. And so California was able to distill some interesting data from their affinity lodges, the retention and so forth like that. And so there were some very interesting topics that come out, and allows you to, again, to think about how can I as a grandmaster or future grandmaster, improve the Masonic experience. And from my standpoint as a past grandmaster, how can I help out if they want my help? So it's an important thing to do, to be able to get together and to have those discussions that you wouldn't be able to have otherwise, with the exception of 2 grandmasters, sitting over a drink and saying, this is what I do, this is what I do. Whereas instead of you having, this whole conference, this mini conference, or for that matter, bigger conference, people all talking, and now guess what? All kinds of ideas start germinating. And that's one of the beautiful things of the conference, and it's an amazing thing. Like I said, since about the 1700s, grandmasters have been getting together in one way, shape, or form. Now, there were times in the history of the conference when we didn't meet. For example, during the war years, really didn't get together. Right? Travel was kind of a restricted thing. And now since the war years, we've been meeting consistently year after year after year. And you think about anything in life that's gone along that long, for the most part, the idea of the conference, if you will, of grandmasters, whether it be just grandmasters getting together, or now what we have, this more formalized thing now, the idea that something has existed for 300 years is fascinating to me. And I think it speaks directly to the value of it, that grandmasters still see the importance of getting together and discussing the issues at hand, and to continue discussing issues. And here's another cool thing: it's not just the grandmasters. I talked about some of the other groups. One of the really cool things that's happened over the past couple of years is how Scottish Rite has seen how important this conference is, and how they can better, and what can they do to help the Masonic experience. Last year, David Glatley, who is the Sovereign Grand Inspector General for the Northern Masonic jurisdiction for Scottish Rite, introduced something called more than a man, a Mason. It was basically an advertising campaign that the Northern Masonic jurisdiction put together, and they gave it away for any Grand Lodge to use. And it's been incredibly successful. I mean, you've probably seen some of the links I've posted on the Facebook page, and people have shared it, and they've shared the videos, and they're fantastic. And they inherited a lot of, and one of the interesting byproducts is that Scottish Rite was starting to get inquiries, but the majority of the inquiries they were getting were for people who were not Masons to be members of Scottish Rite.
Interesting.
So they created version 2 of that. Now, version 2 of that now became a partnership of the Northern Masonic jurisdiction and then the Southern jurisdiction of Scottish Rite and Shriners International. So you got the 3 big, appendant bodies, concordant bodies, getting together and saying, something, we have a role that we can play in helping improve the Masonic experience. And so, Grand Lodges, this is our gift to you. Do with it what you wish. It's absolutely amazing. I was sitting in the room because I wanted to hear this presentation, and I was sitting in the room, and the energy that came from David Glatley to Jim Cole to Jeff Souter, who's the Imperial Potentate to Shrine, was just stunning to me. And I think this is one of these great projects. And again, what's going to happen is that you participate in this program. Any leads that come to Scottish Rite that are supposed to be like Washington specific will go to the state of Washington.
And it's great to see that all those groups are working together at the Conference of Grand Masters, and all those Grand Lodges are getting together. Unfortunately, we're about running out of time for this episode of the Working Tools podcast. So on behalf of David and myself and the recently departed worship brother Stephen Chung,
he departed.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much again. Most Worship Brother Jim, for coming out and discussing the Conference of Grand Masters with us. We look forward to seeing you again soon.
Absolutely. Catch you soon, guys.
All right. Thanks. Bye.
Bye-bye.